The laughter started before the human even reached his seat. In a hall filled with gleaming exosuits, scaled armor, and cybernetic plating, he looked almost fragile, just dark fabric clinging to his frame. No weapons, no protection, no status display. Yet something in the way he moved, quiet, balanced, deliberate, made the sound of that laughter feel temporary. Rows of alien cadets leaned back in amusement. "Where's his armor?" one hissed. "Is this a uniform or sleepwear?" another joked. Their metallic voices echoed across the chamber, bouncing off the polished walls of the Galactic Academy of Defense Sciences' combat lecture hall. The human didn't respond. He just bowed once to no one in particular and took a seat in the back row. His movement was soundless, almost rehearsed, like someone trained to exist around notice rather than within it. At the front, the instructor, Professor Dalvek, a tall, four-eyed insectoid with varnished exoskeleton deep brown in shade, tapped his datapad to review the new cadet's file. He expected Terran to mean loud, reckless, clumsy. Instead, the translator hesitated on a single ancient word. The display flickered, stuttering through half a dozen dialects before settling on one Terran term that didn't translate cleanly. Ninja. The laughter stopped. Even the translators fell silent, unable to categorize the word title, soldier, or predator. Dalvek's mandibles twitched. He'd seen that term once before, buried deep in a restricted Earth archive labeled Cultural Warfare Historical Threats. He looked up slowly. The human was no longer in his seat. "You don't understand," the professor whispered. "That's not a uniform." He turned, realizing the human was now standing right behind him, silent as the grave. "That's a ninja." Silence filled the lecture hall. The alien cadets shifted in their seats, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. The human Alex Tanaka stood there in plain black, hood down now to reveal short dark hair and calm eyes. With no flourish, he returned to his seat, the room's tension rising in his wake. Professor Dalvek cleared his throat. "Cadet Tanaka," he said. "Today's topic is Cultural Combat Doctrines of Primitive Worlds." He ran a clawed finger through a holographic lineup of armored warriors from diverse species. "However," he continued, "we will proceed differently." He gestured to a door at the back of the hall. "You will participate in the intruder simulation. Everyone else will attempt detection and containment." Murmurs erupted. The alien cadets exchanged glances. Some straightened personal shields, some tweaked their recording drones. One reptilian cadet hissed softly, "He must be a freak show. How much can plain cloth do?" Alex didn't speak. He simply nodded once, quietly, and stood. The lights dimmed slightly. The timer display on the wall lit up. 0, 10, and counting. Within seconds, the room was alive with scanning beams, drone hums, biosonic field pulses. The alien cadets braced themselves with high-end gear. They expected spectacle, maybe a quick lesson in human weakness. They did not expect what came next. Alex turned and walked toward the door at the back of the hall. He moved with the kind of economy that made the sensors flicker. He paused at the threshold, pressed his palm flat against the cool metal, and then stepped through. The timer ticked. 0908. Before the second tick, the room noticed nothing. The screens showed only emptiness. The drones hovered in fixed patrol loops. The motion sensors registered only background noises. The radiator vent flared. A subtle shift, but nothing remarkable. The alien cadets leaned forward. The reptilian hissed, "Where is he?" A slug-like cadet clicked its tongue. "He must be hiding in that storage closet." Another armored cadet pointed a scanner at the ceiling vent. The feed flickered from green to red. But that red register vanished in a split second. Professor Dalvek watched the readouts, his mandibles drawn tight. He muttered under his breath, "Impossible." Minutes passed, then pause. On a wall-mounted monitor, one of the cadets glimpsed an image, an inverted reflection of Alex's face, hanging from the ceiling, backwards. Then the feed cut out. A murmur rippled through the hall. "What kind of warrior is this?" one cadet whispered. "He hasn't triggered a single alarm." Alex reappeared in the back row, quietly sitting down as though he had always been there. The sensors still showed nothing. The drones hovered unchanged. The timer beeped, 8:37 remaining. Dalvek's voice broke the hush. "Proceed," he said, as though unsure whether he'd started something he couldn't control. And so the simulation began for real, the cadets splitting into teams, launching detection sweeps, deploying sonic pings and motion halos. Meanwhile, Alex stayed still, expression neutral. He didn't twitch, he didn't breathe audibly. He blended into the shadows of the room like he'd been carved out of them. Every attempt to locate him failed. A cadet scanned the floor plates, no heat signature except for the ambient. Another sent a drone under the desks, nothing. Yet someone heard the click of a badge hitting the floor. Another turned and found their datapad gone. They looked for Alex but found nothing. The laughter of earlier was completely extinguished. Confusion replaced amusement. Even arrogance paused. Dalvek leaned forward, his 4 eyes unblinking. "You don't understand," he repeated. It was not a reprimand, it was a warning. The cadets realized that their gear, their shields, their advanced detection systems, they all assumed presence. But presence was the human's weakness. Absence was his weapon. In the absence of alarms, in the silence of movement, Alex sat calm. His breath quiet, his muscles relaxed, his mind watching. And the room waited. Professor Dalvek didn't call out again. He simply gestured to the timer. The exercise continued. 11 minutes remained, and the alien cadets were now operating with the urgency of embarrassment. The first real sign that something was wrong came when Gorlek, a heavy-framed brute from the Freital Combine, activated his kinetic shield for a sweeping pass of the room. It pulsed outward, strong enough to detect a mouse beneath the floor tiles. The shimmer passed through the hall, untouched. A second later, Gorlek blinked down at his chest. His security badge was gone. "How?" he started, but cut himself off. A small, neatly folded square of black cloth now lay on his desk, precisely where his hand had just been. The Frattle's eyes darted around. His voice had lost all humor. "What is he?" Across the room, another cadet, a slender, pale green quadruped named Yessie, stood frozen beside her console. She held her scanner aloft, staring at the blank display. "He passed behind me," she whispered. I felt the air shift. A sharp clatter echoed from the far side of the hall. Another badge dropped to the ground. The room had become a game of patience. One by one, cadets lost possessions, not stolen in haste. Removed, examined, and returned or placed in plain sight, like some invisible opponent was toying with them. And through it all, the sensors recorded nothing. The cameras captured no movement. The biometric filters picked up no breath. Dalvek moved to his terminal and adjusted the feed. "Body cam footage," he said quietly, "from Cadet Tanaka's suit." He tapped a command. The footage began to play on the overhead screen. It was silent. Black walls, the glint of light off metallic scales, alien backs turned, drones drifting lazily above. And then motion. But not what the cadets expected. Every step Alex took was measured. He hugged corners, slid along shadows, crawled under seats, dropped down silently from upper vents. At one point, he lay flat behind a console for 3 minutes, unmoving, heart rate steady at 48 beats per minute. When he tapped a cadet's shoulder and disappeared again into the darkness, his body cam showed the retreat upward, into the ceiling. He'd used a narrow gap in the paneling no more than 30 centimeters wide. Yessie spoke again, barely audible. He wasn't just hiding, he was choosing his moment. Another cadet, the loud one who had joked about the human sleepwear, stood, frustration growing. "This is a trick, holograms maybe, a drone mimic." "Then explain this," Dalvik said. The lights flickered only once. Every simulated weapon system on every cadet's arm deactivated simultaneously. Shields went down. Targeting overlays blinked out. The drones froze midair. A hush fell. Then came a voice. Calm, close. "If this were real," it said, "you'd all already be gone." Alex stood in the center of the hall. He hadn't entered through a door. He hadn't been seen. He simply was there. At his feet lay 22 security badges. Each one floated down in slow descent, suspended on microfilament lines that gleamed under the pale glow of the ceiling. He stepped out of the circle of them, dusted his hands once, and bowed. The lecture hall was silent. Alex looked at the professor. "May I be seated?" Dalvek nodded once, slowly. "You may?" The human returned to the back row, walking across the floor with the same soft balance as before. Gorlick finally muttered. He wasn't hiding, he was hunting. Professor Dalvek opened a secure file on his terminal. "You are correct," he said. Your detection systems are advanced, but you are used to known movement patterns, organic motion. Even synthetic mimics follow predictable signatures. He brought up another file, this one ancient drawn from Earth's earliest military records. Grainy footage, woodblock sketches, short texts. This is where it began, he said. Your sensors did not fail. They were never trained to detect a human weapon forged, not through tech, but ritual, repetition, pain. The screen showed a series of training montages, humans standing on poles, motionless for hours, crawling through swamps in silence, holding breaths for up to 5 minutes, navigating sound and light patterns blindfolded, throwing stars to hit targets through layers of smoke. This is a tradition older than powered flight, Dalvek said. They learned silence because noise got you killed. They learned patience because hesitation got you killed. They learned shadows because the only thing worse than being seen was being expected. No one laughed anymore. The reptilian cadet who had hissed before leaned forward. What kind of predator fights like this? Dalvek didn't look away from the screen. A species that hunted itself, that weaponized stealth long before it weaponized flight. You trained for detection. He trained for disappearance. Then, abruptly, one of the cadets stood. "Professor," he said, requesting a review of injury protocol. That kind of evasion, it only works if he's willing to risk impact trauma at speed. Dalvek blinked. "Explain." He dropped from a vent 7 meters up. "Without armor." Alex's voice came softly from the back. "I rolled." The cadet turned. "You rolled on ferrocrete." Alex nodded. "Yes." Another cadet pulled up the footage again and ran the drop sequence frame by frame. He hits shoulder first, tucks the leg, their ankle twists at impact. Then, he recovers. The room was no longer mocking, they were studying. Dalvek narrowed his eyes. "Cadet Tanaka, are you injured?" Alex exhaled quietly. "Minor ligament strain, nothing torn." "We need a scan," the professor said. A medical drone whirred to life and floated to Alex. It scanned his lower leg, paused, and projected a 3D model. Dalvek frowned. Ankle grade 1 sprain, some inflammation. That drop wasn't survivable for most humanoids without injury. Alex shrugged faintly. "I knew the roll angle, taught from childhood. Still landed wrong. We'll send you to medical after class." "Understood." No bravado, no downplaying it, just acknowledgement. The class noted that, too. Dalvek turned back to the class. "We have much to learn today," he said. "Dismiss your pride, engage your intellect." He turned off the simulation display. "The ninja does not enter battle to win," Dalvek said. "He enters to not be noticed. Victory is secondary to survival, and survival is about not being touched." The cadets remained silent. The badge circle still lay on the floor, unclaimed. And for the first time since the Galactic Academy began cultural combat studies, the class voted unanimously to extend the lecture. An hour later, the combat hall had emptied. Most cadets remained in quiet clusters in the corridor, reviewing footage, whispering in subdued tones. Their pride had retreated, replaced by fascination. 2 even walked the perimeter of the room, examining where Alex had moved, trying to reverse engineer what sensors had failed to catch. Meanwhile, Alex limped quietly behind Dalvek down a side corridor. The professor had insisted he report to the Academy's medical wing. The sprain was mild, but protocol was protocol. "You should have informed me immediately," Dalvek said, tapping notes into a pad. "If you'd miscalculated that roll." "I didn't," Alex replied, steady. The professor glanced sideways at him. "There's a difference between being confident and being intact." Alex's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "In my training, pain was instruction. We learned by consequence." Dalvek didn't respond immediately. His insectoid gait clicked faintly as he walked. "And yet you accepted the correction when offered." "That too is discipline." They reached the medical wing. Inside, a tri-species team of medtechs prepped a diagnostic bay. A reptilian nurse stepped forward, tail swaying. Terran lay flat on the pad. Alex obeyed without hesitation. His movements were sharp but controlled, despite the obvious swelling around his left ankle. The scanner slid over him with a quiet hum. The lead physician, a cyborg Davrilian, studied the results. Grade 1 ligament strain, mild edema. Slight compression at the tibio-talar joint. You landed wrong, but your boot braced the worst of it. Alex gave a short nod. Training boot. Flexible forefoot, mid-weight heel. Transfers impact. Dalvek raised an eye ridge. Your footwear absorbed part of a 7-meter drop? Yes. Designed for controlled descent on urban terrain. The physician looked impressed. You'll need cryocompression and at least 48 hours without lateral stress. No drills. No climbs. Alex nodded again, silent. And, the Avrelian added, I'd recommend staying off it for 12 hours. You've already caused micro-tears. Push it and you'll rupture something. I won't. The nurse applied the cryoband and adjusted the fit. Cold, pulsed into the tissue, reducing swelling without numbing. Alex didn't flinch. When they left, Dalvek didn't speak until they were halfway down the corridor again. You're not the first human at this academy, he said finally. But you are the first they've called ninja. Alex looked straight ahead. I didn't choose the designation, Earth Command did. Do you know why? There was a pause. Because we're not meant to be soldiers, Alex said. We're a relic, a study in restraint, in old war. And yet, here you are. I was activated last minute. The original cadet for this program got a punctured lung 2 days before departure. I was next on the list. Dalvek stared at him. You mean this wasn't your intended assignment? No. I was scheduled to teach urban evasion courses on Ceres. Civilian defense training. The professor stopped walking. They sent a stealth instructor to a combat theory course, he said slowly, and gave you full cadet clearance. Alex met his gaze. With a warning to avoid use of techniques unless authorized. You broke that warning today. No, Alex said. I adapted. That word lingered between them. When they returned to the lecture hall for the debrief, half the cadets stood to attention at his arrival. Not because of protocol there wasn't one for cadets, but because no one wanted to be seated while he entered the room. Alex bowed slightly. Not to them, not for formality, but as acknowledgement. The projector activated overhead. Dalvek cleared his throat. Now, we continue. He tapped the console. Your assignment: analyze the infiltration failure. Explain where your systems failed and why. The cadets began loading data, but one Gorlek raised his hand. Permission to ask the Terran a question? Granted. Gorlek turned toward Alex. Why the silence? Alex didn't blink. Noise is traceable, even foot pressure, even breath. Every signal is a thread someone can pull. But without weapons, how do you defend yourself? I don't get found. But if you are? Alex's eyes didn't waver. I end it before I'm recognized. A low, startled sound passed through the room. Another cadet, the small-bodied Talaxian, chimed in. You fight by ending fights? Alex finally stood. He walked slowly to the front, not a dramatic entrance, but a lesson in posture. Even limping, his steps were clean. You all use force as a declaration, he said. Armor, weapons, sound. Visibility is power. He paused. Ninjas used invisibility as peace. If we did our job right, nothing happened. No one noticed. No one died. He tapped the side of the console. The screen displayed a series of Terran maps. Ancient, marked with winding alleys, rooftops, forests. Every terrain type had a doctrine. Every sound had a counter. Every step had to be right. One clip showed a traditional Japanese dojo. Old earth footage, wooden floors, barefoot movements, silent training drills. We trained to sense what others missed, to disappear not just from view, but from expectation. The cadets were riveted. Alex turned off the projector. You call it primitive, he said. We called it survival. He looked back toward Dalvek. May I sit? Yes, the professor said, his voice unusually soft. Alex returned to his seat, slowly. No pride in the limp, just the truth of injury. Dalvek turned back to the cadets. You've all asked what this training means for modern war, he said. It means this. There are still ways to fight that you cannot measure with tech. Ways that punish assumptions. He paused. And if you're lucky, you never meet a ninja when it counts. The following morning, the Galactic Academy's training grounds were unusually subdued. Not a single cadet arrived late. Not one wore their armor incorrectly. Even the usually rowdy group from the Kalari front colonies whispered as they walked. Word had spread beyond the combat hall. Instructors from other departments had started requesting the footage. Tactical theory had already canceled its morning lecture, replacing it with a joint session, Asymmetric Combat Threats Case Study, Earth. Cadet Alex Tanaka was absent from the quad. Instead, he reported directly to the rehab wing at dawn, in compliance with medical orders. He didn't argue. He didn't try to return to drills. He simply arrived at the precise hour requested, took a seat on the therapy platform, and adjusted his injured ankle for the cryocompression technician. The medic, a short, broad-shouldered Dravani, with 4 hands, tilted its head at him. "You don't look like someone who slipped." "I didn't," Alex replied. "It was an impact roll, 7 meters. I mistimed the torque." "You mistimed torque," the medic echoed, pulling up his chart. "Still walking, though." "Wasn't clean. I landed a split second late." "You were in combat?" "Demonstration." "Worse," the medic said, and pressed the activation node. The band sealed around Alex's ankle with a low hiss of cold vapor. As the pressure adjusted, he closed his eyes, breathing slowly, each exhale measured. "Pain?" the medic asked. 6 out of 10. "You're answering fast." "Always better to answer fast than pretend it doesn't hurt." The Dravani paused. Other humans try to downplay. "I'm not here to impress you," Alex said evenly. "I'm here to recover." After 20 minutes, he was cleared to walk slowly. Limited lateral motion, no climbing, no jumping, no combat exercises for 72 hours minimum. He nodded and thanked the technician before exiting through the maintenance corridor to avoid attention. Back at the lecture hall, Professor Dalvek stood before a silent room. "Today's subject," he announced, "is humility." No one shifted, no one scoffed. He flicked on the central projector, and the lights dimmed. "Each of you will attempt to replicate Cadet Tanaka's stealth maneuvering. 5. The room froze. Gorlek raised a hand. "We can't fit into vents, Professor." "You will not use vents." Another cadet asked quietly, "Are we to replicate his movement or the effect?" "Both," Dalvek said. "A modified simulation chamber has been prepared. You have 30 minutes to prepare." No one protested. But as they filed out, the tension was thick. 2 hours later, after half the class failed to avoid even basic detection in the controlled chamber, Dalvek called for a recess. Alex returned shortly after, walking slowly, with a compression brace now visible under the hem of his training pants. He didn't speak, just observed. Yessie approached him cautiously. "How did you learn that level of silence?" Alex glanced at her. "Practice." She hesitated. "How long?" 15 years. Her mouth opened slightly. "Since you were?" 7. Gorlek, standing nearby, made a low grumbling sound. "That's madness." "No," Alex replied. "That's normal where I trained. We weren't child soldiers. We were taught to understand how violence begins, so we could end it before it did." Another cadet stepped forward. "You said you weren't meant for combat. Then why join the academy?" "I didn't," Alex said. "The program did." Yessie frowned. "You were forced?" Alex shook his head. "I was requested. Politely. The mission needed someone who could vanish." There was something terrifying in how casual he made it sound, not proud, not mysterious, just real. Dalvek stepped into the cluster. "Cadet Tanaka has volunteered to assist with the next module. He will not demonstrate, he will observe. You will attempt." The exercise began in pairs. Each cadet had to cross a simulated environment, urban, dense with corners and shadows, and reach a target undetected. One by one, they failed. Even the stealthiest species, the Nochari, with their triple-jointed knees and natural camouflage, couldn't match the fluidity the human had displayed. Half the class found themselves frustrated, the rest were fascinated, but all were silent. During one pass, a cadet slipped. The simulated environment jolted, signaling failure. Alex's voice came low from the observation deck. "You leaned." The cadet, sweaty and panting, looked up. "What?" "You leaned too early when rounding the corner. Your shadow moved before you did." "But I was inside cover." Alex shook his head. "You were visible from the waist up, and your breathing gave you away." The cadet checked her telemetry. Sure enough, irregular heart rate, elevated respiratory output. Another tried, crawling low through a vent simulation. Alex didn't speak until she reached the end. You dragged your knee, sound signature registered in the subharmonic range. A ninja wouldn't have moved in that pattern. We're taught to move as if someone's always listening. Dalvek approached the deck. You were trained to treat sound like light. Worse, Alex replied. Light only travels in one direction. Sound circles back. Gorlick rubbed his forehead. How is this not an extinct art? You're using muscles we don't even isolate in basic conditioning. Alex offered a small smile. That's the difference between war and ritual. You trained for victory. We trained for silence. He stood slowly. You treat stealth like a tactic. But it's a lifestyle. I don't walk like this because it's useful. I walk like this because I can't not. Silence again. One cadet raised a hand. What's the point? With modern surveillance, you can't just vanish anymore. Alex raised an eyebrow. Then why couldn't your systems detect me yesterday? The cadet fell silent. Dalvek looked to the class. The answer is not in the technology, it's in how you think. He pulled up a graph on the display, two curved lines. One labeled sensor evolution, the other human movement training. They're not in conflict, he said. They're running parallel. And the moment we stop watching how the body adapts, we stop preparing for how it resists. The cadets didn't know what to say. Alex sat back down, exhaling slowly. He adjusted his ankle again, still sore, not healed, but stable. Dalvek faced the class fully. You laugh at cloth uniforms, you mock the lack of armor. But today, you saw what Earth refined, not through superior materials, but through necessity. He closed the display. And necessity, he said, makes the deadliest teachers. 3 days passed. By then, the cadets no longer laughed when Alex entered a room. They no longer compared his uniform to burial cloth or pajamas. They didn't question the absence of armor or gear. They simply acknowledged him with the kind of subtle respect soldiers reserved for someone who had earned it not through noise, but presence. Alex moved with a crutch now, at the academy physician's insistence. The ligament had healed enough to walk, but still protested with every angle change. He followed orders without complaint, arriving to class early, avoiding unnecessary movement, logging his therapy check-ins without fail. The cadets had watched every second of the original footage at least 10 times, not because it was assigned, because they were trying to understand. And for many, understanding had become uncomfortable. Dalvek opened that week's final lecture without preamble. No simulations today, no drills, just questions. He turned to Alex. Would you be willing to explain something for the class? Alex nodded from the back. Dalvek gestured. Why was your training preserved? Earth's modern forces rarely use it. Alex stood, moving carefully on the crutch. He paused before answering. Because it wasn't for war. The room stilled. It was for peace, Alex said. Originally. In the old centuries, the first practitioners used stealth, not to fight, only to avoid fighting. They infiltrated castles, gathered intelligence, removed weapons, convinced warlords to change plans. He glanced at the row of cadets nearest the front. They weren't always assassins. They were specialists in not being where you expected them. A Talaxian cadet tilted her head. But you trained in it. For real? Alex nodded. Earth has archives. Certain military schools kept the disciplines alive, not for full combat, for search and rescue, intelligence gathering, hostage recovery, and other missions. Gorlick asked, What kind of missions? Alex hesitated, then answered without detail. Ones where failure meant silence wasn't optional, it was required. Yessie, softer now, asked, Doesn't it take a toll? Alex smiled faintly. Eventually. That's why I was assigned to teaching after my 3rd deployment. Lower injury risk. But you came here. Alex looked toward Dalvek. I didn't know what to expect. But I didn't come to be studied. I came to contribute. A quiet settled over the room. Dalvek broke it. Cadets, what have we learned this cycle? The reptilian cadet who had mocked first and loudest answered first. That absence can be a presence. That movement can be more dangerous than any weapon if you don't see it coming. Another added, that survival doesn't need to look powerful to be powerful. Dalvek gave a slow nod. And? The youngest cadet, barely past her first term, spoke in a near whisper. That humans don't just adapt, they prepare for situations no one else believes are survivable. Alex remained silent at the back, letting their words settle. Dalvec tapped the central console. The overhead projector glowed. A new database entry began to populate. Subject: Homo sapiens. Subtype: Historical stealth operative. Common designation: Ninja. Classification: Cultural combat doctrine. Tactical role: Asymmetric infiltration. Psychological deterrent. Threat level: Unquantified. Observation protocol: Engage only with verified clearance, never alone. He looked toward the class. This entry will become part of the Academy's mandatory reading for all cadets in first contact warfare and espionage countermeasures. No one objected. Then he faced Alex. Cadet Tanaka, you've completed your temporary assignment here. Earth Command has issued a transport order. You'll return to your prior post once cleared by medical. Alex didn't react visibly. Understood. You will leave a void in this room. I'm trained for that, Alex said, and for the first time, a few cadets chuckled genuinely. When the class ended, several approached him not for photos, not for praise, but with questions, real ones. How do you isolate movement like that? Do you train heart rate control before breathwork or after? Can you feel when someone is about to spot you? Alex answered only what he could. Not everything was teachable, not everything should be. By the time he stepped through the departure gate the next morning, the cadets had lined the corridor, not in formation, but in acknowledgement. He bowed once, slowly. No ceremony, just thanks. Yes, he called out. What do you call that bow? Alex glanced back. Gratitude, the invisible kind. Then he stepped through the hatch. A week later, during a high-risk simulation in the Academy's Wilderness Dome, the cadets encountered a scenario that required stealth extraction. The designated team, led by Gorlek, didn't hesitate. They didn't raise shields. They didn't charge. They used shadows. They whispered. They mapped heat patterns. They remembered. And though their techniques lacked the finesse of their human instructor, the success rate that day broke Academy records. Back in the main archive, a small note was added to the entry on ninjas. Recommended: engage with cultural liaison before dismissing Terran traditions as obsolete. Survival is not always visible, neither is victory. The cadets came to mock a uniform. They left with a doctrine of disappearance,